We have with us today as guest speaker Lisa Ede from Oregon State University, a friend, colleague, and mentor to me for a number of years. I worked with her at Oregon State for a while. Her work in the past that has been truly influential has included work on collaboration that she did with Andrea Lunsford, and her current work on blogs, I think, will be informative and interesting to us, and on citizen reviewers. She is going to speak to us with Michael Ferris from Oregon State also, and so I would like to extend a hearty welcome to Lisa Ede and to Michael Ferris.
Thank you, Suzanne. I want to begin by saying how pleased Michael and I are to be part of this exciting new research summit. I can't imagine a more interesting or timely subject, and I mean that with absolute literalness. Thanks to today's discussions, I've learned much that I'll take back to my own campus and to my own teaching. When Suzanne invited me to participate in this summit, my first thought was that I had more to learn from than to contribute to this conversation. While I do maintain, to my surprise almost, a personal blog, and I can tell you the story of how that happened, have used blogs in teaching and am involved with OSU's OSU Write blog project, which is a project to create a university-wide blog. This is modeled on the University of Minnesota's YouThink project. I do not consider myself an expert on online technologies and education. Hence, my invitation to Michael Ferris, an MA student in rhetoric and writing at OSU, to join me today. Thanks to his personal experience with blogging, which predates my own experience considerably, as well as his work on class blogs and research or K blogs, Michael is much more of an expert on this subject than I am, and I think this has come up multiple times throughout the morning that our students are the experts in many respects. So here's how our presentation will work. I will talk about an online research project where I do have some expertise, a study of online citizen reviews. If you're wondering what online citizen reviews are, think Amazon.com reviews, and you've got it. Michael will then speak about blogging and its potential uses in teaching and research. Our title reflects, we hope, the connections between our two presentations, for both focus on the nature of what we're terming online citizenship. Perhaps the most efficient way into my talk today is for me to contextualize my study of online citizen book reviewers who contribute unpaid reviews to such sites as Amazon.com, vis-a-vis 3 points of entry. The first point of entry is through cultural studies, which by now has a well-established tradition of studying popular culture. Another point of entry is via internet studies. This growing interdisciplinary field is at the cutting edge of efforts to consider the social, cultural, political, and economic consequences of online technologies. It will not surprise anyone attending the summit when I say that my third and most important point of entry is via rhetoric and the rhetorical tradition. Indeed, my use of the term citizen reviewers is modeled after rhetorician Rosa Eberle's use of the term citizen critics in her study Citizen Critics, Literary Public Spheres, where she studied letters to the editor that were submitted to newspapers about controversial literary publications. One of the hallmarks of a rhetorical approach to communication is a focus on the situatedness of discourse. I quickly realized that in the case of online citizen reviews, this situatedness includes not only contemporary practices, but also past traditions and experiences. One of the most cogent facts about online citizen reviews, for instance, is the challenge that they represent to the traditional system of print reviewing, a system that was developed with remarkable speed after the collapse of the patronage system in 18th century Great Britain. Within 20 years, the major print reviews had already been established. And the reason they were established was because it was impossible to tell who was an author versus who was a hack, for instance. I'll have more to say about the relationship between online citizen book reviews and the system of print reviewing later in my talk. For now, though, I want to articulate the primary goals of my presentation today. These are, first of all, to describe online citizen reviews and to situate them, however briefly, in the context of such related online forms as blogs, vlogs, podcasts, and wikis. And I'll say right now that my technology of communication involves only writing and speaking, so I don't have any PowerPoint or other. I didn't go live. I didn't try to do that. My second goal is to delineate some of the opportunities for research that online citizen book reviews represent. Those studying writing and online technology should care about online citizen book reviews, I argue, because these reviews provide new opportunities for citizens who lack the cultural cachet of, say, a reviewer for the New Yorker or the New York Times to disseminate their ideas to a potentially broad audience. As such, they represent a powerful challenge to cultural hegemony and an opportunity to both explore and embody new forms of discursive online citizenship. They also represent a potentially rich data set for scholars interested in rhetorical analysis, popular culture, literacy, reception studies. You can go online to Amazon and literally see how a book is received, the consumption of culture, the history of authorship, publishing, and the book, and the sociology, psychology, and economics of taste and consumer behavior. So what are online citizen book reviews? Online citizen book reviews are reviews written by unpaid volunteers that are published on the web. As I mentioned earlier, perhaps the best-known online citizen book review site is Amazon.com, but there are many, many others, including allreaders.com, dearreader.com. My handout is in my bag. I have a handout that I will give you after my talk that lists these various sites. I apologize for not remembering, but I did remember now, so that's a good thing. Bookreporter.com, CompleteReview.com, and Blether.com. Online citizen book reviews also appear on many, many personal websites and increasingly on blogs. Given my time limits today, I can't spend the time I would like describing these various sites. I do have a handout I now read here, however, that includes a number of major sites you can explore, and I'll be sure that you get that before you leave today. For now, I would simply like to point out that a small, but I would argue significant number of ordinary individuals have gained considerable cultural authority via unpaid online book reviews. Some of you may recognize the name of Harriet Klausner, currently the top-ranked reviewer at Amazon.com. Klausner, who has posted more than 11,000 reviews on Amazon.com, has been, and who has no claim to fame other than that she was formerly a librarian, has been featured in articles in the Wall Street Journal, Wired, The New Yorker, and the New York Times, among others. Knopf publicity director Nicholas Latimer currently sends Ms. Klausner every fiction title his house publishes because he, quote, likes her to weigh in, end quote. Latimer does this despite the fact that, as I said, Klausner's sole claim to fame is her top-ranked reviewer status at Amazon.com. It's no accident that Klausner's reviews and those of other citizen reviewers are appearing online, for they are participating in changes in communication technologies, forms, and practices that it's easy to characterize as revolutionary. Even as we do that, we need to remember that every new development in communication technology strikes us as revolutionary. So when phones were first invented, nobody knew what to do with them, for instance. They couldn't give phones away. It took 10 years for the first photocopier, for the person who invented the first photocopier, to find enough backers that he could make and distribute it, because why would I want to use this? So it's always good to have that historical memory. Consider the rise of weblogs or blogs, and John, I have a different figure than you do. As of last Wednesday, the internet says As of last Wednesday, so 2 days ago, Technorati, an online site that describes itself as, quote, the authority of what's going on in the world of weblogs, end quote, and is considered by many to be the most reliable tracker of weblogs, noted that its real-time search engine was tracking 38.8 million sites and 2.4 billion links. The About Technorati page on the site adds that approximately 75,000 blogs are created throughout the world every day, and roughly 1.2 million posts appear daily. Talk about self-sponsored literate action. But there are other developments in online communication that are equally significant. Take vlogs, video weblogs, for instance. Last spring, when the well-known blogger Glenn Harland Reynolds reported on the 2005 Blog Nashville Blogger Conference, he predicted that, quote, within a year or so, we'll see video bloggers beginning to compete with TV news operations, especially local news operations in quite a few places, and that is happening. Bloggers are also participating to big media outlets as well. Podcasting has also taken off. As many of you are aware, podcasting software enables ordinary individuals to, in effect, host their own radio shows. One of the most popular podcasting radio shows right now on Podcast Alley is a couple who live on a farm in rural Wisconsin, and one day a week they just go into their living room and podcast. I can't remember the name of the program. As is the case with blogs and vlogs, getting your ideas out and having readers, viewers, and listeners are two entirely different things. Already, however, some podcasts, such as Adam Curry's Daily Source Code, have as many as 10,000 subscribers. In spring of 2005, San Francisco's KYCY-AM became the first radio station to convert to an all-podcast format. So everything that they put on the air, it has been sent to them and is created by an individual podcaster. And then there are wikis. To get a sense of their impact, one only need think of Wikipedia, which advertises itself. Notice how I'm qualifying all of these claims, which advertises itself as the biggest multilingual open access site on the internet. Some teachers and scholars question the accuracy of information presented in this online encyclopedia. A recent study of scientific information presented on the site, published by the British journal Nature, which is quite a well-respected journal, found, however, that Wikipedia, in terms of scientific information, Wikipedia was roughly as accurate as the Encyclopedia Britannica. Wikipedia relies upon people going online and constantly correcting information and posting new information. I've digressed a bit from my specific topic of online citizen book reviews, but I hope the logic of this digression is apparent. Online citizen reviews are part of a much larger phenomenon, one that's making it possible for ordinary citizens to not only share their views with anyone who has a computer, but also to challenge the norms of high culture and the authority of conventional expertise. For just as online citizen reviews represent a challenge to the conventional system of reviewing, so too do blogs, vlogs, and podcasts represent significant challenges to the traditional media, which are, hardly coincidentally, rushing to incorporate and commodify them. TV series now have blogs where characters in the series blog about their lives in the series. Sites like Wikipedia strike even closer to home as they challenge conventional assumptions about and practices of scholarly knowledge and expertise. How can educators best understand and respond to the dizzying changes that we and our students are experiencing in the world of online technologies and online discourse? As the website for today's New Research Summit points out, many of our students are more familiar with these technologies and discourses than we are. In such a situation, it's tempting to adopt extreme positions. Some faculty members take the position that these new forms of communication represent a challenge to educational rigor, or as John said, to the ability to perceive and thus act, and thus should play no role in students' formal education. Others argue that education must adapt to changes in students' discursive experiences. A recent article on academic uses of podcasting in the Chronicle of Higher Education that some of you may have seen, for instance, included very strongly worded statements both for and against educational podcasting. As I mentioned a moment ago, when new technologies of communication are developed, responses to these technologies are often extreme and tend to alternate between the utopian and the dystopian. Think, for instance, of the claims in the 1950s and 1960s that television would ruin children for education. I think my generation turned out all right. Thank you very much. Indeed, those of us with a commitment to the rhetorical tradition can easily recall how suspicious Plato is of writing in the Phaedrus. We should hardly be surprised that citizen reviews, blogs, vlogs, podcasts, and wikis, that's kind of a mouthful, are eliciting similarly charged evaluations. Some of those who study the new media agree with Dan Gilmore, author of We the Media, Grassroots Journalism by the People, for the People, that the texts that appear on blogs, citizen book review sites, and other forms of online communication hold the utopian potential of overturning big media and bringing something resembling democracy to culture and communication. Others fear that these same communication technologies threaten to weaken already challenged or limited standards for knowledge, culture, and taste. They wonder as well if customer reviews on Amazon.com and other commercial websites represent not a laudable resistance to cultural hegemony, but rather the ability of capitalism to co-opt and commodify individual acts of self-expression and communication. Those who hold this view are quick to point out the key role that customer reviews play in Amazon.com's business model and the speed with which big media, business, and industry have attempted to capitalize on the blogging phenomenon by establishing their own blogs. I'd like to address this utopian-dystopian binary by returning to my project on online citizen reviews. Earlier in my talk, I indicated that these reviews hold the potential to challenge cultural hegemony, and I'd like to take a moment to provide some historical context for this statement. To do so, I need to invoke the literary ferment that existed in Great Britain in the collapse of patronage. As Frank Donahue notes in The Fame Machine, Book Reviewing in 18th Century Literary Careers, and this is a direct quote, literary production in Great Britain in 18th century existed in a kind of limbo between an age of substantial aristocratic support and the fully developed literary market of the 19th century. As a result, during this period, authorship became increasingly defined in popular criticism, so that from 1750 onward, literary careers were chiefly described and indeed made possible by reviewers who published their reviews in such periodicals as the Monthly Review, founded in 1749, and the Critical Review, founded in 1756. Since that time, the system of expert reviewing has spread throughout much of the West. In the United States, reviews published in such established venues as the New York Times, the New York Review of Books, Harper's, The Atlantic no longer publishes reviews, I think, and so on, have played a key role in demarking the boundaries between high and popular culture. While many ordinary citizens demonstrate their indifference to these distinctions by choosing not to read these and similar publications, reviews written by those credited with cultural authority have traditionally had a great deal of power to shape and inform educated or elite taste. The mere fact that the publicity director of Keynote currently sends Harriet Klausner every fiction title his house publishes simply because she is the top reviewer at Amazon.com suggests that this balance of power may be shifting. It's certainly the case that with the rise of the internet and of social media software, ordinary citizens are with increasing frequency asserting their right to produce as well as to consume content. The texts that these citizens produce ought to be, I would argue, of great interest to anyone working at the intersections of writing, rhetoric, and educational and communication technologies. One particularly rich site for analysis is Amazon.com, for Amazon provides multiple opportunities for ordinary citizens to post content on its site. You can post images of your favorite product should you like to do so. The first thing to note about citizen reviews on Amazon.com is, as I indicated earlier, that they are very definitely part of Amazon's evolving business plan. As James Marcus describes in Amazonia, 5 years at the epicenter of the dot-com juggernaut, when Amazon opened, Jeff Bezos hired credentialed writers and journalists to write reviews of books they sold. As part of Bezos' plan to, in his words, monetize customers' eyeballs, Amazon eventually substituted customer reviews for expert reviews, so this was a business model decision. For some time now, Amazon has made it possible for readers to rank reviews, and it publishes the ranking of every single reviewer on its site. If you find a reviewer who's writing a take on books you like, Amazon.com makes it easy for you to find and read all of his reviews. You just click on See More of My Reviews right next to the name. In these and other ways, Amazon.com endeavors to create a profoundly personalized and yet also multi-layered, multi-purposed community, one that embeds its primary mission, which is definitely selling products and making money in a rich social context. Central to this community is the ability for customers to contribute content freely and directly to Amazon.com. How can one best understand the role that customer reviews play on a site like Amazon? What motivates ordinary people to post reviews on this site, especially when a book has been reviewed many times? 2 days ago, I checked Amazon to see how many reviews of Barbara Kingsolver's The Poison Word Bible, a title I chose at random, appear on that site. The current number is 1,381 reviews. What makes someone want to be the 1,382nd person to review Barbara Kingsolver's novel? What might analysis of these reviews teach scholars about the rhetorical practices of ordinary readers and writers? As this question suggests, citizen reviews represent a potentially important site where both we and our students might study online rhetorical performance. Such a perspective and methodology, I would argue, has the advantage of resisting decontextualized utopian and dystopian arguments. Rhetorical analyses of online citizen reviews encourage us to ask questions such as the following. How have citizen reviewers and the sites that disseminate these reviews established new means of claiming authority, ethos, and of supporting and documenting the judgment that citizen reviewers make, logos? And how do they employ the resources of the web to draw upon appeals to pathos, to values, emotions, and beliefs? Is it possible to identify a stable repertoire of rhetorical practices used by citizen reviewers, or are citizen reviews developing too quickly and too quirkily for this to be possible? Citizen reviews and such related forms of communication as blogs, vlogs, podcasts, and wikis also raise powerful questions about the new social media software and the potential opportunities for discursive citizenship that they're providing ordinary citizens. What new forms of citizenship, indeed new publics, might these social media be enabling? As part of his study of the development of the public in the early modern period, Habermas makes special note of the role that coffee houses, salons, and newspapers played in this process. According to Anne Birmingham, co-editor of The Consumption of Culture, 1600 to 1800, Habermas viewed literary reviews and institutional art criticism as typical inventions of that period. Online citizen reviews are similarly, I would argue, typical inventions of the 21st century. What kind of publics are being formed by communities of readers who write, consult, and rank reviews at Amazon.com and other sites? What new economies of cultural goods, to quote Bourdieu's distinction, a social critique of the judgment of taste, might citizen reviews, blogs, vlogs, podcasts, and wikis be encouraging and enabling? Wouldn't these be good questions for us and our students to explore as we undertake new forms of research and explore new media as teaching tool and object of study? Thank you.
And I'd like to start off with, I do have an image I'll be working with, but it's not PowerPoint, so don't worry about that. Before I discuss my experience with blogs in Lisa's class last fall and for my research, I'd like to ground my experience with blogs in education within the context of my history with technology. I like to view myself as on the cusp between two generations, and as a child of the 1980s and 1990s, I was among the first to grow up with computers in my elementary and high school classrooms. I was amazed when I recently learned that colleagues only a few years older than me didn't have computers in high school, and also because of my age, I negotiated my way into the internet in high school much later than those who just a few years younger than me did. And in a time of such rapidly changing technologies, I'd argue a few years makes a lot of difference. While I quickly acculturated to the internet, it's definitely not something that has always been there as it was for my 8th graders whom I taught last year. My experience with using computers and internet technology in the classroom began with emailing classmates and using discussion boards in high school English classes and submitting publication layouts and papers to my teachers through networks my senior year of high school. Beginning in high school, research could also be done online, and I'll be honest, this helped to incorporate play into work. I recall my college prep course my senior year, 16 students in the computer lab, each of us researching or writing about our topics, simultaneously emailing each other jokes or stories, posting to discussion boards, and holding face-to-face conversations. I'd like to fast forward now to my senior year of college when, in order to share my self-sponsored writings with my friends and acquaintances, I published my first zine. And I'll mostly be showing images here. And here you'll see an issue of my zine. What a zine is an independently published magazine. And they've been popular among countercultural and subcultural groups since the 1960s or 70s. Arguably, the genre is actually quite old. You could even date it back to Thomas Paine's Common Sense, if not before. I titled my zine Sisyphean Task, echoing Albert Camus' account of Sisyphus as someone who is happy in his punishment because of the struggle towards the goal and not because of the goal itself. And so the struggle for the goal is enough for fulfillment. My zine served several purposes, but I think foremost among them might have been an aid in my search for and an exertion of my own voice. What, you may be wondering, do zines have to do with the new research summit and with the title of our talk, Online Citizenship, Amazon.com, Citizen Reviews, and Student and Classroom Blogs? Well, it was in early 2004, less than a year after printing my first zine, that I began blogging on Blogger.com. And I see the genesis of my blog, also titled Sisyphean Task, as arising out of my self-expression in zines. Kevin Brooks, Cindy Nichols, and Sybil Preby write in their online article, Remediation, Genre, and Motivation, that the web, and this is a quote, "The web is remediating all media that has come before it, print, music, film, television, radio, paintings, email, etc. Therefore, we want to emphasize that weblogging is not a radically new way of writing, but a repurposing of familiar print genres. For me, blogging started out as a way to remediate the genre of the personal journal, and I would later begin to remediate other genres on my blog, editorials, letters, and political commentaries, among others. By the time I found myself in Lisa Ede's Language, Culture, and Technology course last fall, I was an active blogger for nearly 2 years and read at least 20 blogs consistently, and administered or contributed to at least 5 other blogs. For this mixed undergraduate and graduate course, Lisa had set up a class blog using the blogware Movable Type through OSU Write, which she described really briefly earlier. This was a new endeavor not only for Lisa, who didn't have much experience blogging, but also for the majority of the students in the class, only a few of whom had blogged some before. Lisa titled her class blog, The Presence of Others, and I'll show an image of that here. And she was deriving the title from Hannah Arendt's statement in her book, The Human Condition. For excellence, the presence of others is also required. I was excited for the opportunity to see how blogs, something that had such personal and social meaning for me, would work in a classroom setting. It's interesting that before Lisa and I had met face-to-face, I had actually stumbled upon her blog through Paul Bausch's Or Blogs website. Lisa and Bausch had both posted about online citizen reviewers on their respective blogs, and I and other bloggers were able to read this and discuss those ideas on both their and our blogs. So on both Lisa's blog, Paul's blog, and my blog, and others. Within a day of posting on my personal blog some of my initial reactions to Lisa's questions regarding online citizen reviewers, I was receiving feedback from students in Australia, among other places. As we are all probably likely aware of, blogs have the ability to provide a forum for the quick spreading of news and political commentary, such as with the Hurricane Katrina aftermath or with Stephen Colbert's recent speech about George Bush. However, I think that the spread of Lisa's online discussion regarding online citizen reviewers is a testament to how quickly academic knowledge and academic discussion can spread as well. Lisa's first assignment to us for the class blog was to introduce ourselves, both in terms of who we are and with our history of technology. I think I outed myself right away as a blog nerd with the extensiveness and enthusiasm of my post, but I was quite surprised as to the resistance and fear of my classmates. Wrote one student, and it's quoted here. This isn't as big as I expected, so you probably can't read it, but I'll read it here. I am not sure about the whole blog thing. It just seems too neoteric or modern and chic for me. Plus, I don't know how confident I am with complete strangers reading my thoughts, concerns, anxieties, excitements. Other students expressed fear, distrust, and stress revolving around the use of technology in general. On the other end of the spectrum were a few students who were regular bloggers or felt very comfortable with technology. This blog was going to obviously be an experiment with a technology new and unfamiliar, if not downright scary to most of us, that would involve communicating between students in a way that I didn't think any of us had communicated with classmates before. Right away, however, students were commenting on each other's posts, offering support, sharing experiences, and asking questions through the blog's comment feature. This was exciting for me when I saw how quickly everyone began commenting on the blog. Near the end of the term, one of my classmates posted about the success of the blog, noting that there were 228 individual posts with 383 comments, and so this is within 10 weeks.
21 students.
Yes. This seems like a lot of not only text generation for 10 weeks, but also a lot of dialogue to me. One of the most exciting outcomes of this blog was that we were able to engage in discussion with authorities whom we would not have otherwise been able to talk to in such a public sphere. This led to a discussion on the blog with Paul Bausch, co-founder of Blogger.com and an administrator of OrBlogs, Charlie Lowe and Tara Williams, who both run classroom blogs and wrote Moving to the Public weblogs in the Writing Classroom, published in the online collection Into the Blogosphere, and James Paul Gee, author of What Video Games Have to Teach Us About Literacy and Learning. What is particularly interesting about Gee, I think, is that his involvement was student-sponsored. By this, I mean Lisa had contacted Bausch and Lowe and Williams, but a classmate of mine actually went out on the internet, found Gee's email, and invited him to engage with us. In his post to our blog, in Gee's post to our blog, he wrote, "I have looked at your blog and am just really amazed at how interesting, creative, and just plain smart the whole discussion is. I am usually no fan of such chats because it often seems that the discussion is less good than the document being discussed, but your comments, positive and negative, really add value to the material in my book." I think Gee's comment adequately summarizes the type of work students engage in on the class blog. Students were willing to discuss openly and honestly about what we read in class texts, as well as share some personal experiences that helped create a community of learners and thinkers. As exciting as dialoguing with Bausch, Lowe, Williams, and Gee was, I think the online dialogue with my classmates was the most exciting feature of this blog. Right away, I found myself sharing personal experience, both experience that related to class discussions and experience that helped to build relationships with classmates. I might dismiss my experience of sharing personal stories on the blog as having to do with my comfort with blogging and the personal, but I found that many of my classmates shared personal experiences, and we found ourselves discussing a variety of topics, including sports, music, and war. I think there's a fear, which Gee is hinting at in this comment, if not downright expressing, that online discussion will degenerate into personal blogging irrelevant to the coursework. I think this fear is often founded in a dystopian position, which Lisa has mentioned, that new technologies will result in the degeneration of academic discourse. I have a different perspective than this dystopian position because I think it is based on the assumption that personal experiences will dilute academic discourse. I see certain values in the sharing of personal experiences. I think one of the biggest challenges of teaching is creating a strong learning community, a community of students who share experiences and develop the same goal as learners. The wonderful thing about our class blog is that we were able to share personal experience and build cohesion as a class. The dialogue on the blog related to personal experience, built rapport, helped us connect as people, and helped in the development of a strong learning community. Additionally, we were able to ground the class content in our own personal experience, making the learning authentic and applicable to our own lives and work. As the quarter progressed, Most students' posts to the blog became self-sponsored in that Lisa did not assign them. While Lisa occasionally assigned a post to the blog in response to a specific reading, many students opted to post their responses to course reading online so that their journals became public and part of a dialogue rather than a private reflection on the reading. For me, this was an amazing opportunity to see the course readings in a new way, to see reflections, interpretations, and insights that normally do not get shared in class because of time, because of fear of sharing, or because of other constraints. Our engagement on the blog was able to do something that to me was phenomenal. We were able to create knowledge while continuing our course discussions outside of class. One student wrote on a blog post which they titled, "Who Moved the Classroom?" And this is what they wrote. "For me, a blog is a positive way of taking class out of the classroom without making it a chore, especially since we are not required to post in the class. That almost makes us want to post more sometimes." Oopsie. I'm not used to that mouse feature. Okay. Before moving into discussion of my research blog, I'd like to quickly quote two of my classmates' end of the term reflections on using the blog. One classmate of mine wrote, and this is highlighted in that first one if any of you can actually read that, "Every week it seems like some new way of learning and writing takes place on the blog, from questioning public versus private space to political issues to challenging both the authors we're reading and our classmates. I'm thinking more publicly, but at the same time sharing more private thoughts than I thought I would." And another one wrote in the second one, "I can't think of a better way to communicate with my classmates in a non-classroom setting. Discussion boards are rigid, emails are boring and slow," which I think might get at attention that was talked about earlier, because emails are still pretty quick. And blogs are versatile, quick, linkable thoughts that flow from one to the next, well, like they do in my head. While I was actively engaged in blogging and on the course blog, it was not until I read Andrea Lunsford's The Everyday Writer that it occurred to me that the weblog could be used as a log for research. Lunsford writes, "You might prefer to begin a weblog for your research project. You can use it to record your thoughts on the reading you are doing and especially add links from there to websites, documents, and articles you have found online." And that was a direct quote. Lisa suggested that I pilot the use of individual student blogs for OSU Write. So using the open source software, blog software WordPress, I set up a blog on my OSU web space, and I titled the blog "A Collage of Citations," which is what you see here. And also, both Lisa's blog and my blog are linked from the new Research Summit blog and are listed in the handout that was mailed to you. I began to research the use of knowledge blogs, K-logs for short, which are used to keep track of research. I found that students and faculty in various disciplines, including rhetoric, visual psychology, feminism, and bicycle engineering, were using K-logs to store and discuss research. Traditionally, students often use notebooks, journals, or note cards to keep their research. My blog, as well as those that I looked into, usually incorporated bits and pieces of all three of these styles of research. I sometimes just posted quotations and citations in a post, like a note card, and sometimes I journaled in reaction to a source or for brainstorming, like using a journal or a notebook. What made using my blog more advantageous than keeping either a journal or a notebook was the ability to create categories. By attaching a category or multiple categories to each post, I was able to later sort my post by categories and read each blog post I'd written under a certain category, such as the category voice. You notice over here, oh, I think I can use this. On this part right here, you'll notice I've posted on all these different categories. In addition to a place to keep my research, my blog also became a very handy place to pre-write. I noticed, however, a shift in the way I was brainstorming and the way I was pre-writing, which I posted on my blog about. And this is what I wrote on this slide or on this picture. When I normally do research and then do brainstorming, free writing, or pre-writing for a paper, I have a sole audience in mind, me. However, my last entry was a brainstorming pre-writing activity that was geared not just toward an audience of me, but to a larger audience. I felt like I was no longer writing to just formulate my own ideas, but to explain my ideas to an audience, real or imagined. So my pre-writing journaling activities have changed in that my audience has changed and that I'm cognizant of it as I write. So then my free writing's purpose has changed from exploration to exploration and explanation. Indeed, I had found that my audience had changed. I was able to get feedback on my ideas as well as some suggestions from other sources. These came not only from Lisa, who read my blog, but from classmates, friends, reference from google.com searches, professors from other universities, and other writers. The ability to receive comments and hold discussions through these comments helped me formulate ideas and think more in depth about my topic, as well as to learn new sources and new things to read and learn from. This shift to research as a social activity was very exciting for me, as I saw the potential to learn from others and engage in online conversation. In a way, the privacy of research was lost. It was no longer safe to make mistakes because there was a chance someone would read it. However, I've always valued process, as I mentioned before, and understood that the value of learning from mistakes. So the risk of journaling in public was a relatively low risk for me. When writing my paper at the end of the term, I found that the use of the blog was very helpful. I didn't have to worry about losing something, not being able to find a source, or losing all my research if I had lost a notebook or a computer file or my computer. If I had an electronic source, I'd link to it. If I couldn't remember the author of an article or something that he or she said, I could use the search feature of my blog so I could find something really easily just by a keyword or something. I found my thoughts and research were more organized and more easily accessible than I was used to. The blog had become a way for me to organize myself more efficiently. At the end of the fall term, I began to reflect on my process of using my blog, and I noticed that more often than not, I hadn't ventured as far into writing about what I thought about my sources and about my research as I would have liked. So once the term was over, I wrote here, shouldn't I be reflecting my thoughts, my personality into this weblog? Shouldn't posts not only contain information from others, but also my reflections upon that? I did do this in some posts, but rarely. I could have been more brave and put my immediate thoughts related to what I was blogging about. So from now on, I'm going to try to make this a bit more personal of a research log. To try to value my personal and immediate reactions to my research more. I've since tried using my blog as a place to formulate my own ideas, to brainstorm more, make conjectures, and explore ideas more fully than I had before. I've started using it for other coursework and have started some brainstorming for thesis ideas on it. One of the potentialities of blogging research, I believe, is the possibility of a more collaborative research and dialogue surrounding research. I agree with Tiffany Herard and Robert Boyce, and this is to quote Tiffany Herard, that it is the failure to make research social as a practice at each stage that inhibits the possibility of the completion of more books, articles, and study guides on radical thought. Noting that isolation is counterproductive, and this is to quote Herard again, Boyce, author of Professors as Academic Writers, encourages academics to work collaboratively to get unblocked and to move beyond the competitive impulses that undermine the possibilities of universities becoming centers for empowerment. While a community of bloggers who keep their research online and comment on each other's blogs isn't collaborative writing in the traditional sense, I see it as a tool that could be used to recreate a collaborative model. As I think about the potential of student use of blogs in the classroom, I consider what was advantageous about my blog. The format of the blog helped me organize my notes and brainstorming, and the public forum allowed for responses from others, as well as discussion. I wonder what a classroom of 20 or more students, each with an individual student blog, blogging their ideas and research and commenting on each other's blogs would look like, and the possibilities of that are pretty thrilling, I think. I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity for Lisa and me to speak here today, and I'd like to close with a few questions that I'm continuing to grapple with. Earlier, Lisa asked what form of new citizenship and new publics these new online forums are creating. When online publishing can be nearly instantaneous and academic discourse can be conducted at a faster pace, how does this affect the way that we do research and the way that we do dialogue? Does blogging, as bloggers and researchers Toril Mortensen and Jill Walker argue, influence the way you think about blogging, as well as the process and method of research? I'm also beginning to wonder how students interact and represent themselves online, and how this differs from, or perhaps even changes, how they represent themselves and interact in the classroom. The opportunities for new areas of research and new ways of discourse are rife with the continual development of new online media technologies. And I think Lisa and I are open for questions now.
And I could go get my hand out.
Yes.
I don't know if I missed something, but I was wondering if students were given any models or guidelines about how to write critically, or whether they just did that evolve as they wrote.
On Lisa's blog?
Yes.
We weren't given a model, and
Definitely no models.
yeah.
I mean, although, well, that's not, we looked at CultureCat, for instance. I mean, so we put up some blogs, but there wasn't any effort to model that kind of discourse, because this is, I conceived it as the equivalent of informal writing to learn. And so its purpose, and we did view it as an experiment, and so I didn't want to prejudge the experiment by telling students what they should do or how they should do it.
It's just amazing how it turned out, because the few blogs that I've seen fall into what I think is the all around no genre. And so, yeah, it's really amazing.
I think as I went back and reread my classmates' introduction, I saw some kind of themes going on, and one of them was, I can't remember her first name, but a woman whose last name is Serfati, I believe, writes about, she wrote a book about diaries, and she notes that diaries always begin with self-reflexivity, and the fact that you initially start writing about writing a diary and who's the audience and what your purpose is. And while not all students did this, it was a consistent thing. Students would write about what it was like being writing on a blog. And like Lisa's first blog post on her individual blog was like that. Who is my audience? Why am I blogging? And I think if you look at the majority of blogs, it's a pretty consistent first step.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It seems that you did accomplish the goal of establishing a community of people who were able and willing to share personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think certainly that is an admirable set of aspirations. But what happens when students start to disagree? Start to argue with one another?
We should say, first of all, that they shared a lot more than personal experiences. So, I would say more of the content is analytical and relates to the course readings or to issues that grow out of the readings than to personal. I would think that would be maybe 5-10% of the comments.
Yeah.
But there were disagreements, definitely. In fact, the students were more likely to disagree about readings or about positions on the blog than they were in class. So.
What trajectories did the disagreements take? Were students able to concede or to agree that perhaps their perspectives were mistaken or wrong, or how did argumentation take place?
You and Chris had, I think it was you and Chris had quite a long.
Let's see. I think
he's going to try to find an example.
I like using examples. So these are all the posts that had to do with James Paul Guy's, and no, that's when Guy posted to our class. Okay, I'm not finding it. Maybe it wasn't Guy's book. But a few of my classmates and I definitely disagreed, specifically with Guy's book. I remember talking about and writing about whether you should be using video games in the classroom, and what we really started to dialogue about was what was the purpose of Guy's book. Because in it he argues that there's some fundamental things about how you learn that we can see how students or youth learning with video games, how you can apply that to a classroom. And early on in the book, I don't think it's completely clear if he's advocating for using video games in the classroom or if this is a model for using in the classroom for other activities. And so there was a lot of debate over should we use video games, and then there was the debate over should we be, and Guy flat out states in his book, I'm not going to discuss gender roles in video games, I'm not going to discuss violence. And a huge part of our dialogue was, I think he should be discussing that because you're learning this stuff, you're learning violence, or you're learning models for, or are you learning these? I think it's a worthy discussion to have about video games. And so my point was I think he dismissed it too quickly, and so we had a bit of a dialogue over his purpose in doing that. Our class definitely, our ideas were not homogenous. It was.
But how did you deal with the conflict? Did it just remain? Do you remain in a state of difference, or were you able to? Did you change your opinion or over time?
I definitely changed my opinion because I couldn't stand the book when we started reading it, and I think it was through other people pointing out some of his viewpoints that I was able to, by about halfway through the book, understand his viewpoint more. So I think our opinions definitely changed, and it was very respectful and conversation.
But there wasn't a particular drive toward consensus.
Yeah.
So there were lots of threaded discussions that went on for some time. And people would, I don't think anybody ever said, I have now changed my position entirely. But people would say, I see your point. You make a good point here. So it was, it followed along in the model that you would have of a face-to-face conversation more than a debate, I guess I'd say.
There was no real pressure in that. I mean, I remember watching it, but I don't remember there being any real pressure to come to consensus. It was really more to make sure that the discussion.
Yeah, it was really.
I remember reading your post and saying, early on, and thinking, oh, Michael doesn't get it. This really isn't about video gaming. This is really about what video gaming can teach teachers about learning. And sure enough, we came around.
Yes.
Well, I'm curious as to the difference between using a class blog and a class discussion board, because I have attempted the class discussion board, and unless I force assignments and force a specific amount of posts and a specific amount of response, that I don't get much. And even then, I just get the minimum, whatever it is that I've required. And it seems like this blog just sort of blossomed, and people got really into it. And I'm wondering, is it a difference in the form between a discussion board and a blog? And really, to me, since I'm not familiar with blogging, but very familiar with discussion boards, maybe you could talk about the difference between the two?
I can't talk directly about the difference between the two because I never have used a discussion board, but Dr. Vicki Toller-Burton, who, along with the Center for Writing and Learning and Technology across the curriculum, it's our 3 units that proposed and got grant funding for OSU Write, the university-wide blog that will be fully up and running in the fall, has used discussion boards and just says that this feels, she and her students agree that this blogging feels more natural, it feels more like the other kind of online work that students do. The other thing I should say that's really important, and Michael and I are seeing the difference in a class we have together this term. The language, technology, and culture class was in a special computer classroom that the English department at Oregon State has. So in addition to having a console, we had wireless laptops. And we did not take them out every class meeting. In fact, maybe 5 times throughout the term, maybe 6. But it was possible early in the term. I think the fact that we had the laptops, and I would say now, introduce yourself, and we'd be in there and it would go bing, bing as people's introductions got up there. And so, and we're both in a class on current composition theory this term, and there's a class blog. We don't have even a console in the room. We don't have access to laptops, and the experience is more like what you described for your discussion board. So I think the availability, I think there are a number of things at issue. One is that the students could see that the blog was an enactment of, it was a site where we could experience the intersections of language, culture, and technology. And so I think it seemed more directly relevant to them, whereas the students in 512, it's like, oh, I have to go home, I have to get out my computer. And so all of those, I'm very glad you asked those questions, because we would not want to suggest that just, you could automatically have a blog in a class and that you would have these results. There's just like there's a synergy in a class. Some students are talkative. Some classes are talkative and lively. Some aren't. I would think you would expect the same range of variation. And also the relevance. This was tightly connected to the content of the class. And the students who did not have much experience with technology, I think, felt adventurous, and they're both kind of frightened and adventurous. So there was a particular synergy going on with that, with our blog that you couldn't expect in all blogs.
I would definitely argue for this situation and what the class is like is how it's going to affect this. Charlie Lowe and Tara Williams have had wonderful successes in composition courses and in fiction class. Last quarter I tried to blog with my Writing 121 class, and they wouldn't post to it unless it was an assignment, like please post this. But Sarah Jameson at OSU, for her business writing classes last quarter, had a blog, and it seemed to me to be really successful in creating dialogue. And they were, and what was interesting for hers is she combined two classes onto one blog, so they were dialoguing with people that they never met and might possibly never meet.
I have a question about the citizen reviews. There's been conversation about adding that capability to library catalogs. So university library catalogs, which raises lots of issues about authority and whatnot. So I was just, wondering what you think about that.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I think from one perspective, you might say, why not? Why not get people more engaged? But I'm thinking, right on the spur of the moment, I would think that you would want to make very clear distinctions between, these are ordinary people, citizen reviewers. You would want to make that absolutely clear and distinguish those. Actually, in the way that on Amazon.com, so you go to the Poisonwood Bible, there are editorial reviews, and then there are what they call customer reviews. So as a way of bringing more voices in, and I think if students were commenting on the usefulness of certain sources, I mean, you'd have to take it all with a grain of salt, but you definitely wouldn't want to blend them. I mean, you'd want it to be very distinct. That's an interesting question.
Well, just that our catalog software will accommodate those kinds of links. We haven't turned it on. We had a discussion about it some time ago, actually before you were here, and we decided not to.
I'm sure there are advantages and disadvantages. There would just have to be. I mean, there could be even technical. Would it bring the server down?
We've had a recent discussion, a long discussion, and it's still going on about whether we want to open up our library catalog to harvesting by Google, which would mean that our records would be out on the open web and would presumably draw people back in. I'm in favor of it. Many people are not in favor of it, because our students are already in that space. They're already using Google. That's where they start their research. So to me, it's a way of potentially drawing them back into more authoritative information, and that's why I'm in favor of it.
I'm sorry, what did you say it's called? What is the term?
Harvest.
Okay.
Harvest the metadata.
Okay.
So you're talking
Sounds
about
tasty.
allowing Google bots and
Right.
stuff onto the site to go ahead and make the
Right now you're blocking. Right now
to
you're
make that
blocking the
information
robots.
pop up
Yeah.
in a Google
Google,
search.
a little over a year ago, Google had contacted me and asked for permission to do it. And I raised it at that point with library administration, and some other people in the library vetoed it. And so just a few weeks ago, I raised it again because I think we need to have a broader discussion.
Yeah.
We need to artificially end this conversation, though it can go on. Let me I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this discussion. I'd especially like to thank the crew, Lynette Boone and Katie Potter, for videotaping this. This means that We will have streaming video available in several days.
But nobody will be able to hear it unless you put that
From our website. And you can check the website for that streaming video so that you can review what was said here. And we're very grateful for that ability to do that, and very curious to see how it turns out. And so I would very much like to thank you for your help, all your help in doing this. Expertise. I would like to thank Robin Pappas for the 1 minute and stop signs. Thank you. That we needed to keep on time. This summit meeting began because I originally was going to write a pamphlet about about the implications of the new media for teaching writing. And I found out that nobody wants pamphlets anymore. In fact, there's piles and piles of pamphlets in the English department closet that nobody wants on all kinds of things. So that was the first clue I had that the lone scholar model was changing. I intelligently gathered together a group of people to talk to about this. Raphael, Carter Souls, and Kom Kunyashing have been key to the discussion that eventually arrived at this summit meeting. We went to John Gage and Nicole Malkin at the Center for Teaching Writing and asked them to help us with putting on this summit. I would like to thank John and Nicole for their hard work in doing this. I'd like very much to thank Lisa Ede and Michael Ferris for agreeing to come down here from Oregon State and to talk about their experiences there. I wish very much that we can have more of this kind of cross conversation. It really, in many respects, doesn't make sense that we don't have more already, but we should have more. I'd like to thank Jim Crosswhite for leading us off. I'd like to thank Carol Hickson and Heather Briston for talking to us about the archives and about Scholars Bank and the digital collections. And I'd like you all to go check now, again, the digital collections and think about putting your material in Scholars Bank and about the enormous opportunity that that provides for research and for publication. I'd like to thank Kom Kunyashing and Carter for their presentation. I think that you have raised a lot of extremely significant questions about teaching and the use of new media, and I would love to hear more from Kom at some point, and maybe right after we finish here, some of you will want to talk to any of our speakers. If we can hang around for a little bit, and there's even things left to eat and drink if you want to do that. I'd love to hear Kom on the subject of controversy in the classroom after showing videos like this that are the most inflammatory on the web, and the discussion is all over the web of these videos. To know how to deal with that in a class is one of our most important tasks. So I think that's an extremely important offering. And I'd like to thank our panel, our vigorous panel, John Gage, David Frank, Michael Aronson, Mary Fechner, Jeff Magado, and Raphael for their comments. Thank you all. I think that this summit, which was a result of an IT fellowship and IT sponsorship and the help of the Center for Teaching Writing, raises the questions about how we have to reconceive sources, we have to reconceive our methods, and we have to reconceive the products of scholarship. We've only just begun to raise these questions. It's been a wonderful day for me, and I thank all of you for participating.
everyone.